Okay, well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining this session this morning. As Charlotte said, my name is Francisco de la Vega. I'm CTO from FICODES. FICODES is a gold member of the FIWARE Foundation, and one of the components that we are handling within the FIWARE ecosystem is this one we are going to present today, which is called WireCloud. WireCloud is basically a tool that allows to create different kind of operational and visualization dashboards, mainly using web technologies and trying to focus on non-developer people, allowing them to create dashboards without the need of having to code too much. Okay, some coding is always required. Okay, so let's start. The instance of WireCloud I'm going to use today for the session is this one. I'm here. I'm running the basic WireCloud Docker image directly in my local machine, so it will be the basic Docker images without no customization, just to focus on the features and avoid too much noise today. For the session that we are going to follow today, we are going to use some data, some real data that has been provided by the City Hall of Terrassa in Catalonia from a project that we are working with them there for creating some smart platform for the management of their of some buildings. They have some sensors, etc. Okay, so let's start. Well, this is the landing page of WireCloud by default, and I'm going to sign into the system using a local user, in this case. Okay. As I mentioned before, I'm using the basic WireCloud image, okay? So I'm using local users right now. If you are familiar with this component, or you have been playing with some of the components in the FIWARE ecosystem, you may know that this component can also be integrated with identity management stuff. So if you are familiar with FIWARE, you can use Keyrock, for example, as identity manager with this component. Or if you have different systems, this is completely OpenID compatible. So you can use other tools like for example, Keycloak, etc., in order to create, in order to manage the identities here. But I don't think this is the point today. Okay. Once I'm logged with a local user, what you are going to see is the list of the different dashboards that you have created. And then there are some navigation options. You basically have here two different buttons. The one that called My Resources allows you to see all the different WireCloud components we are going to see later that you can use currently in your different dashboards. And you also have the option of going to get more components, to access to the marketplace, and to install some of the public widgets and operators and WireCloud components in general that we are making public, so you are able to install it directly from the FICODES Oplafy marketplace. Okay. So if we want to create our dashboard, the first thing that we need to do is clicking here. You will see that we have empty workspace list, and what we need to do is to create a new workspace. So when we are going to create a new workspace, we have to provide a name for this. For example, training, and then you have the option to select a template. This is something that we will see later when we are able to publish our workspaces. But for now, I am just going to select the name, in this case, training. Okay. So we create our dashboard and our workspace. Okay, I think I have some networking issues. Okay. Okay, so now we are within our workspace, and you can see that this is an empty workspace. This says, hey, this is empty, so please add some content to your workspace. If we want to start editing our dashboard, what we need to do is to change the tool into editing mode. And to do that, we can just click on this pencil, and now this is in editing mode. So let's add some content to this dashboard. If you want to add some components, you just need to click on this button, Add Components, and here you will see the list of components that you can add. WireCloud is based on two different types of WireCloud components that can be added to the dashboard. The first type of component that you can add are widgets that are the ones that can be displayed here. For example, I'm going to add, for example, a map. Okay. So here we have a widget. You can see that we have displayed that we have our map here. I can move it. I can resize it. I can do a couple of things. I can, for example, rename it. Okay, you can, if you go out of the editing mode, you see how the dashboard look like. You can, for example, also hide this bar when you are not in editing mode, so it doesn't distort the look and feel, etc. Okay, so this is the first type of component that we have in WireCloud. In this case, I'm displaying a map. Most of the widgets that we have in WireCloud have some settings that allows you to configure the specific widget. In this case, the settings for the widget can be located here in the options of the widget. You can go to the settings section. You can see that these are the specific settings that apply to this specific widget. In this case, well, we have an initial location, some initial zoom level, etc. So I'm going to configure this. So I'm going to pick some initial location. I'm going to pick some initial zoom level, etc. It is possible to configure other things. You can configure some zoom for the point of interest. You can add layers to this widget because this specific widget I'm displaying here is an open layers widget. So by default, you have this open layer with the OpenStreetMap layers, but you can add, I don't know, satellite or any kind of layer that you want to add to the map. Okay, in general. So I'm finishing configuring this. And now if we reload our page, you will see that now well, we are positioned. Okay, this is the basic configuration of the widget, but probably you are wondering, how do I add data to this specific map? Because probably you will want to see something into the map. Okay, this is where we introduce the second type of component that we have in WireCloud, and a very important concept in WireCloud, which is the concept of the wiring. All the widgets and the other component, which is called operator, that we have in WireCloud has some input endpoints and some output endpoints that can be configured. So for example, within this view, we can click on 5 components, we have 2 widgets, and here, if we go to the list of widgets and we went to our open layers map, you will see that we already have an instance of the open layer map. This is the one that we have instantiated in the dashboard view. So we can pick this component and put this component into the wiring view. This is our map. And you can see that this widget has some input endpoints and some output endpoints. With these input endpoints and these output endpoints, you are able to connect the different widgets and the different operators and make the data flow across the whole dashboard in order to create the business logic. So we have our map, and now we need some kind of data. In order to retrieve the data, we are going to use the second type of component that we have in WireCloud, which is the operator. Operators are similar to the widgets, but the operator has not a front end. It's just a functionality. So an operator is not displayed in the original dashboard, and it is only displayed here in the wiring view. So we are with FIWARE. So what we are going to do is to get some data from a context broker. In this case, an Orion LD instance that I have running in my local instance with some data preloaded, taken from the Tarrasa project. So here we go to the operator, and we have one that is called NGSI source. So I can instantiate my operator. Okay, let's wait a little bit. Okay, I can instantiate my operator, and here you see that in the wiring view, this operator is displayed with this green box. it also has some input endpoints and some output endpoints. This specific operator, the NGSI source, is doing two things. It is making a query to the context broker in order to retrieve whatever entities you configure, and it is also able to subscribe to that specific entities. So if the data is modified, there are real-time updates to this operator, so you can make real-time updates in your dashboard with the data that is flowing. So if we want to configure this, we have to open this menu similar to the widget ones, and we have to go to the settings section. You can see that in this case of this operator, we have a lot of things that can be configured. The first one is the endpoint of the specific context broker, which in this case is running in my local instance. Then we have something which is called NGSI proxy URL. You can somehow ignore this, but this proxy URL is the component that is used in order to enable the real-time updates and the notifications sent to the dashboard. If you are familiar on how the context broker is working in order to send the notifications when something changes, you create a subscription, and as part of that subscription in the context broker, you provide a URL. And then the context broker is going to send you a notification making a post request to that specific URL. The point is, the dashboard that we are creating right now is running in the browser. So it is not possible to get a post request directly to this component. This NGSI proxy is a piece of software that comes with WireCloud that basically intercepts the subscription that this widget is creating, and is creating a WebSocket within the proxy to the dashboard. And then when the context broker sends a notification, that notification is sent to the proxy, and that proxy is sending the data to this operator using this WebSocket that is created here. Okay, just to let you know. This operator is supporting both versions, is supporting NGSI version 2, but in our case, we are going to use NGSI LD. We don't need to send the credentials. When using NGSI LD, we need to configure which is the NGSI LD context. This is very important in order to be able to retrieve the proper entities that we are asking for. This is the context that we currently have in our context broker. Well, we can ask for the NGSI for the system attributes, and then we can specify whether we want the attributes in normalized, in key, or in key values format. Then we need to configure the query itself. In our case, we are going to retrieve entities of type building, and that's it. It is possible to make the query a little bit better because it is possible to specify which is the ID pattern that is going to be retrieved, or even you can just put here the query that needs to be executed in the context broker, just in case you want to filter a little bit more the response. And in addition to this, you can use the monitor NGSI attributes field in order to subscribe to changes in specific attributes of the different context broker entities. Okay. In this case, this is enough. So we have our component already configured. But now we see that the map requires a point of interest type of data, and that the NGSI source operator is returning directly the specific entities given by the context broker. That means that this output and this input is not automatically compatible. So that introduces the second main use of the different operators, which is performing data transformation. In order to do that, we have another operator here, which is called FIWARE data model to point of interest. I can instantiate this specific operator, and what this operator is doing is receiving an entity here, and if the entity has some of the FIWARE data model, knows how to render a specific point of interest. So it is going to generate a point of interest that you can see they are compatible with the map. So I can directly insert here this, and if we go back, we now see the information be displayed here in the map. We see all this information. As you have seen, we have requesting some entities of type building. These are real buildings that are in terrazas, so you can see, well, this is a school. Okay, so here you have different information about this. Okay. Okay, now that we have some data deployed in our map, we can start playing a little bit with all this in order to create something a little bit more interesting. So in order to do that, I want to introduce you one interesting component that allows us to see the information flowing through the wiring. In this case, I'm going to the map resources. I don't have it installed, so what I'm going to do is going to the marketplace. And the component I'm going to install is this one here, called spy wiring. So I'm going to install the component. Okay, now the component is installed. If we go back to our install widgets, you see that the component is here. It's a component of type widget. So we can come to our map. We can click on that component. Here I will have our spy wiring widget. I can instantiate it, and we have it here. This is a very, very useful component if you want to play with WireCloud, because basically it is going to render here anything that you put in the input endpoint. So if we come here and we go to the widgets, and we see here our spy wiring, you see that this has an input and has an output. It can be used for showing what is flowing through the wiring, and it is also can be used in order to put information in the wiring. So you can connect this to anything. In this case, I'm going to connect the point selected to the spy wiring. Oops. Okay. I'm going to connect the point selected to the spy wiring. Sorry, I'm having some trouble in my local instance. Let me reload this. Okay. Now it is connected. So if now I click on this, in our spy wiring widget, we are able to see how the point of interest looks like. The map is basically sending through the wiring connection whatever point of interest I click. So here we can see how this looks like. We have this object who has an ID, who has the icon that is displayed, and then we have a data field where we have the specific entity as it has been retrieved by the context broker. Okay, so you see the info window, etc. So one thing that we can do now that we are able to see how the data looks like is, for example, adding some widget in order to see, in order to display the details of the point of interest that we are showing. And in order to do that, we can use, for example, one interesting widget which is called Markdown Viewer widget. If you are familiar with the Markdown, basically you can use the Markdown language in order to render this whatever you want. Okay, so okay, so if we go to the wiring and we displayed our Markdown Viewer widget, you will see that it has an input endpoint expecting a Markdown input, basically a Markdown text. Okay, but what we have here in this point of interest is not Markdown, it's a POI. Okay, it's an structured JSON. And if we go to the operators, we see that we don't have any operator that supports an automatic translation between a point of interest and a Markdown input. So what can we do? We can use the operator that probably is the most useful operator that you can use when working with WireCloud, which is the function operator. The function operator is a general purpose operator, which includes an input endpoint and an output endpoint. And that if you go to the settings, you will see that it has one single setting, which is an code editor. Here, you can write the JavaScript code that is going to be executed by the operator itself. The input endpoint is in a variable that is already defined, which is called message, and the output endpoint would be whatever you send when you write the return. If you are familiar with Node-RED, this is very, very similar to the function operator that you have there. Okay, so let's write some simple code. First of all, if the data we receive is null, we are not going to render anything. Then we can, for example, render the name of the building, which is within message.data.name, as we have seen with the SPI wiring. And then maybe we can add the description. And finally, we need to send the data through the wiring. So we have to return this. Okay. This is done. And now we are able to connect this to this. And we should be able to connect this to this. And if we go back, I'm having a lot of trouble with my local. Let's see if this is connected. No. Okay. So now if I click in the building, you see that the Markdown is rendered here. So you can see the information about the specific building, etc. Okay. So you can see this information. Okay, but this is not the only data we have. At this stage, we have load from the context blocker the information about a set of buildings. But as I mentioned at the beginning, these buildings have different sensors and have some information that could be relevant when you are creating a dashboard. In this particular case, all the buildings we are displayed here has photovoltaic panels that are generating electricity for the building, and that photovoltaic panels are actually generating some real-time information that can be very interesting to be displayed. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, I can say that we have an historic service that can be called via HTTP in order to retrieve the information of each of the different buildings. So the only thing that we need to do is to make a GET request to the specific endpoint in order to read that information. How can we do that? Okay, let's see. We can go to the wiring section. We can explore a little bit what operator do we have, and we see that we have something called simple HTTP source. Okay, so we can instantiate this. I'm going to remove this by wiring one because we don't need it anymore. Okay, but this operator that we have here is going to make a GET request to whatever URL you send via wiring, and is going to put the data in this output endpoint. So now we need to send a request to this and put a URL here. Well, the easiest way of doing this is, again, we can pick another function operator. We can then configure our function operator. Okay, we are going to get the ID from the information given by the map, in this case, data.id, and I'm just going to hard code the URL, is this one. Okay, so I am putting the ID, and finally, I am sending the URL via wiring. Okay, so we save here, we connected this. Cago en la puta. Okay, then instantiate this and this. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to use an SPI wiring widget in order to see the result. Okay, let's see if this is configured. It is. So we go back. And well, if we click here, we should be able to see the information. Okay, you have seen that now we have received this information here. Let me close this one, I don't need it anymore. And this is the historical data. Okay, so what we have done is we have configured the URL, we are using the simple HTTP endpoint, and this is making a GET request to the backend. That information is flowing via the wiring, and we are able to see it here with the SPI wiring. So we have all this historical data. But probably now that we have the historical data, what we want to do is to show it in a chart rather than in this kind of stuff. In order to do that, WireCloud comes with a very useful widget, which is this one, the one that is ECharts widget. I don't know if you are familiar with this library, but ECharts is a project generated by the Apache project, where it has a lot of possibilities of charts that you can create with a very simple JSON configuration. You want to see how this looks like. This is from Apache, and here you have a lot of examples of the different kind of charts that you can create. You can enter to any of these, and you will see that this is just some JSON configuration. Okay, so what we need to do is to pass some JSON configuration to this specific widget. What we have is this historical information, which is also a JSON document, and we now want to generate some JSON configuration for the ECharts widget. It would be possible to use another function operator and write some JavaScript code that makes the transformation, but I want to show you another operator that we have, which is also very useful, which is the one called JSONATA operator. I don't know if you are familiar with Node-RED, but if you are, JSONATA is the language, is the format that is used in order to specify how a JSON document needs to be translated into another JSON document. It's a very, I would say, it's quite a simple format and is very powerful. So we can connect our output here. And now, if we go to the settings to this operator, we can see that we have again a code editor. And in this case, if we want to generate an ECharts configuration from our historical information, you just need to put the JSONATA object. You see that the JSONATA looks like the final JSON document that you want to generate. And in this case, well, we have some information here, and we are picking in the x-axis the data, and this is taken directly from the original document. It has a field called time with the timestamp, and then it also has a field called accumulated clean energy generated, which includes the actual measure for that. Okay, so this is going to make the data transformation. And if we instantiate our SPI wiring widget, okay, I'm going to add our ECharts widget, and we can connect our ECharts options here. And now, if we select any of these components, let's wait for the data to be loaded. And we are able now to see the line chart, okay? So what had happened? We have configured our GET request to the database in order to get our historical information, and we just create a very simple, you see that is a very small object, JSONATA transformation in order to generate the actual format that you require for each chart. So you are able to see the current information and the information of the building and the information of the chart. So you can play a little bit and you can see how this actually moves, okay? Okay, so now that we have something that can be used, we can play a little bit on how they should look like, because I have just picked some widgets, I have just put the widgets here in the dashboard, and that's it. But if we go to the editing section, you will see that we have several options in order to play a little bit with this. You can just move it or resize it within the grid as they are now, but you have other options in order to create the layout. For example, if we open the options for the specific widget, we can see that it is actually possible to make a widget full screen, as we are doing here now with the map. It is also possible to extract the specific widget for the default grid, which means that you can just move it wherever you want. Okay. As you can see, you can move it to any place and position the widget wherever is better for you. Okay, so for example, here and here, so we remove the editing mode. It looks a little bit nicer. Okay. Okay. This view that I have just created may looks good when we are opening the dashboard with a huge screen. But what happens if you open this dashboard using a mobile phone, for example? Probably it's going to look like crap, because it has not been designed to be displayed in a specific mobile phone. In order to deal with that, WireCloud allows you to define different layouts for different screen sizes, and then you can position the widgets, and you can do whatever you want with the widget for the specific layouts. For example, let's see how this works. If we are in editing mode and we go to the settings of the dashboard, you will see that we have here these screen sizes that allows us to play a little bit with the layout. We have just one, which is the default that is being displayed, but I can another, and I can say that we are going to have two different layouts. One from a screen up to 500 pixels, and another from screens bigger than that. And from this view, I am able to edit this specific view. So you can see that we are currently editing from the screen sizes from 0 to 500. Okay, if we are going to see this in a mobile phone, probably I don't want this to be a full dashboard, and probably I just need this to be one on top, to be displayed one on top of the other. So this is what I'm going to do. Since this is going to be seen in a mobile, probably you would like to see this taking the whole width, and this is what I'm going to do. So we do this, and we do this. Okay, we have finished our edition for this, so we can close here. This go back to normal, as you can see. But if we actually enable this view, this phone view, you will see that it automatically will change to whatever positioning we have chosen. The idea behind this, rather than just a plain responsive implementation, is because we just want not just the widgets to move, but probably there are a lot of configurations that may be very different depending on the specific layout, and this, as we are seeing in this case, for indeed. Okay. Okay. And well, there are other options that you can play with. For example, I have just positioned this here, but if you don't like the widgets to be over the map and you want to give a very special focus on the map, there are some options to move the widgets into the sidebars. For example, I can move this one to the sidebar, and I can move this one to the sidebar. And if we stop the editing mode, you see that the widgets are no longer displayed. You have to click here, and then they are displayed. So you can hide the widgets in the left, in the right, in the top, and in the bottom. Okay, so you see this. And if you don't want this information, you can just hide this. Okay. Now we have created our widgets. We are our dashboard. We are very happy on how our dashboard looks like. How do I export this dashboard and how I make this dashboard available to different people? WireCloud supports several options in order to export the dashboard. First of all, you can always use directly this WireCloud instance in order to share the dashboard with people. And in order to do that, you can come here, you can go to share, and then you can choose the visibility options. By default, any dashboard that you create is private, which means that is only yours and only your user is able to access to this dashboard and to see this dashboard. If you want this to be shared with specific users or organizations registered in WireCloud, you can just search for the user or organization using this search bar and share the dashboard with them. This way, this dashboard is also going to be displayed in their personal accounts, and they are going to be able to access here. But there are other options. If you are creating a dashboard that is public and is intended to be public, you can just make it public. So anyone is able to access this dashboard. And I'm saying anyone, even people who doesn't have an account with WireCloud. So this will be 100% public. And there is a third option in the middle, which is I want this to be public, but only to those users that has an account in WireCloud. In this case, you can choose the registered option, the registered user option, and this will be shared only. It will be shared with all the users in WireCloud, but it won't be public to anyone. Okay, this from the one side. On the other side, you have the option to upload the dashboard to My Resources. This option, what it's going to do is to create a package for your dashboard, similar to the one that we have for the widgets and the operators. Here you can provide some naming for the dashboard, some information about the vendor and the version, which is used as an ID of the specific workspace. You can provide a logo to be shown in the catalog, and then, well, you have the option to embed the current users and widgets operator within the package. So if you do this, and you upload this to My Resources, what is going to happen is that something is going to be uploaded here to the My Resources, something similar to this one, of type mashup. Is another type of FIWARE of WireCloud component, and this is the one I was saying at the beginning, that when you create a new workspace, you can select a template. This template that you select here are actually all the dashboards that has been uploaded to the My Resources section. And that allows you to instantiate a dashboard directly with all the configuration, all the wiring already done. This is useful when you are using just one single WireCloud, but it's also useful when you want to share the dashboard, because one important thing that you need to know about the different widgets and about the different operators is that they have a file format, which is a package format that can be downloaded, which is this package here. And this package can be sent and can be uploaded using this option here to any WireCloud instance. So you can just directly share that package if you want to share your dashboard with any other people. Okay, well, there is a final option, which is the option to embed the dashboard into an external website. You can choose this option. You can copy this code here and paste this code in whatever website you want, and then this dashboard is going to be displayed in that specific website as an embedded dashboard within the website. Okay, and well, that's basically the things that you can do when you already have the widgets and you already have the operators. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how you can actually develop your own operators or your own widgets. And in order to do that, I'm going to move my screen into a Visual Studio 1. Okay. The different widgets and the different operators that are in WireCloud are just web components. That's it. They are a web component. That means that you can basically use any library or any web technology that you want in order to create your widgets and your operators. We are offering, they have a specific structure that we are going to review, and we are offering a grunt init tool that allows you to start this without the need of having to know in advance all the structure. So I'm going to create a repository. Okay. Once you are here, you can, in this case, we can create a new operator with this command, which is a grunt init command, and we are going to create a new WireCloud operator. Okay, now we have some prompts that we have to follow. In our case, we are going to use JavaScript. We are going to use XML as configuration. We will see later. We are not going to use jQuery. Okay, okay. The project name can be called here. Okay. And a version. Some information, some meta information that is requested. And we don't want to make any change. Okay. So now let's have a look at what has been created. Okay, the important part of the widget is here within the source. All the widgets and operators must include in the root of the package a config.xml file. In this file is where we are going to configure all the meta information that is associated to our operator or our widget. In this case, here we are providing, first of all, we are creating an operator. We are providing which is the vendor, which is the name, and which is the version. These three parameters are very relevant because these three parameters acts as the ID of the operator or the widget in WireCloud. So you cannot have a collision here. The same vendor name and version is going to be the ID of the operator. Then we have some meta information that is displayed in the WireCloud side. The title that is displayed in the catalog, well, who is the owner, who is the email information. It has created by default some change log, markdown, and some user guide that you can fill with documentation. So this documentation is going to be shown in the catalog of WireCloud. So potential users of this widget, of this operator, can have the user guide and the change log. Well, you can provide the license, etc. Then here we have a couple of sections. We have the requirements one that allows to add some of the libraries that come with WireCloud in order to do things with it. For example, if you want to work with NGSI and you want to make requests directly to a context blocker, WireCloud includes a JavaScript client library for NGSI that can be used. Well, if you add a feature name NGSI here, that library is going to be automatically loaded for your widget or for your operator. So you can directly use it without having to import it yourself. And then we have two things. We have preferences and we have wiring. Here in preferences is where we are going to define all the entries that are going to be shown within the settings section of the widget of the operator, as we have seen with the map where we put the initial location, or the NGSI source where we put the configuration of the context blocker. All that stuff is defined here within the preference section. And then we have the wiring section. In the wiring section is where we are going to define all the input endpoints and all the output endpoints that are displayed within the wiring section of WireCloud, so you are able to share information within your widgets and operator. And well, finally, you have this script section, which is basically a pointer to the JavaScript code of the operator. Okay, so if we have a look at the JavaScript code of our operator, you will see that it has already created some stuff for us. It has created an initial class called operator and a constructor. This constructor for operator is receiving this mashed platform library. This mashed platform library is the one that allows you to interact with the WireCloud platform itself. And then we have an extra parameter that is where we are going to receive the requirements that we have included in the requirement subsection. You see that by default, it is registering a callback to the preferences. This callback is basically used when any of the settings that you have configured are provided. So this way you are able to automatically do things when the users change your settings. Okay, so let's create something. In the dashboard that we have created previously, we were using a function operator and we were using some simple input endpoint, some simple HTTP operator in order to access to the historical information. In this case, it might be interesting, for example, to develop an operator which is specific to our historic source of data, so we can, I don't know, we can configure that it receives just the ID or the point of interest via wiring, and it makes automatically the request, just for example. Okay, so we can do that. So the first thing that we need to do is to configure the URL of our historical data source. As you have seen in our dashboard before, in the example I made, the URL was hard-coded into the function operator. In this case, we don't want to hard-code this. So what we are going to do is to add a new preference so this information can be configured. Okay, I am adding here the preference. And this is the information that you provide when you add a preference. You have to provide a name. This name is used as an ID of the preference, so you can know what information you are reading from the code. Then you have to specify which is the type. The type is the type of input that is displayed in the settings. So this guy is an input of type text, just a URL. Then you provide the label. The label is the label that is displayed in the settings section of the WireCloud. You can provide a description and you can provide a default value. Okay, once we have registered our preference here, we have already registered our callback for the preferences, and we are able to read this information. So for example, our URL could be a base URL parameter. And now what we are going to do is to read the setting, the default one that is provided with the operator. And in order to do that, we are going to use our mashup platform parameter and this library from WireCloud that includes a preferences API that you can use. And with the get method, you are able to read the specific preference. Here to the get method, you put the name that you have configured here. So you are able to read the base URL. Okay, but this is reading the base URL only the first time that you open the application. If you want the base URL to be updated every time it is modified from the settings, is where we can use this register callback that we have already put. So we can update this every time a setting is updated. Okay. Okay, so now we are able to read this setting. Now, what we want to do is to receive information via the wiring, so we are able to make the request to the historical data source. So in order to do that, we need to configure an input endpoint in the wiring. So we go to the wiring and we configure an input endpoint. In this case, we are configuring an input endpoint. Again, this name is the ID of the input endpoint, so it can be accessed from the source code. This is the label that is displayed in the wiring section. This is the description that is displayed in the wiring section, and this frame code here is used in order to make this highlight that you maybe have seen when we were working in the wiring. If an input endpoint and an output endpoint has the same frame code, they are highlighted so you know they are compatible. Okay. Okay. So we have our input endpoint, and now we need to be able to read information of this input endpoint. So in order to do that, we can also use the Mashup platform library, but in this case, we are going to use the wiring API of the Mashup platform. And okay, so this is quite simple. We are going to use the Mashup platform library. We are going to use the wiring API, and again, we are going to register a callback. In this case, we are not registering a callback from all the input endpoints, but we are registering a callback only for the one that is called POI, which is the one that we have already created here. So every time we receive data through the wiring to this specific input endpoint, this handler here is going to be called. So the last thing that we need to do is to implement this handler. Okay. So I'm going to add this handler here. Okay. So now this method is going to be called every time we receive some information. Okay. We can say that this is going to receive a point of interest. So this will become compatible with a map. Let's do something with that point of interest that we are receiving here. Let's do exactly the same as we were doing as part of our function operator. Let's generate the URL. I'm going to pick the ID from message.data.id. And as you remember, this was the structure of the point of interest. And then I'm going to build an URL. In this case, I'm going to use this base URL taken from the preferences and well, the URL for the historic data, which is no longer hard-coded. Okay, and there is a final thing that I need to do, which is to make a GET request in order to access to this specific data. You can use any JavaScript stuff here that you want. You can make a request with any of the JavaScript plain libraries that are already there. But if you are using WireCloud, you have another option, which is using the make request method that comes with the Mashup platform library. Why? Because the Mashup platform library uses some proxy that comes within WireCloud that allows you to make requests to those servers that has enabled the cross-domain control. So in order to avoid cross-domain problems, you can use this library in order to avoid such a problems. And well, this is what I'm going to do directly. So this is the method I'm going to use. It's Mashup platform, and you can use the HTTP API and the make request method of the HTTP API. This receives a URL, which is this one, and then some options. In this case, we are going to make a GET request. This is a promise. So when we receive the response, we get the data that has been returned by the server. And then there is a final thing that we are going to do, which is to send the data via the wiring. And in order to do that, we have previously configured an output endpoint, and now we are going to configure an input endpoint, an output endpoint. Okay, so we have our input endpoint before, and now we have to configure our output endpoint. In this case, it's called data. And again, it has the label, the description, and it has the frame code. And in order to send data through an output endpoint, we are going to use the Mashup platform library, the wiring API, and the push event method. Here we put the name of the output endpoint, and here we put the data we are going to send. And that's it. Now, every time we get a URL, every time we got a point of interest through this input endpoint, this method is going to be called. We are going to make a request to our server. We are going to get the data, and we are going to send that data through this output endpoint. Okay, simple. So now that our operator is ready, we need to install all the dependencies, first of all. Okay. Okay, we have installed our dependencies, and now we need to create this package I mentioned before. And in order to do that, we can just use Groom build. Okay, so if we now go to the dist folder, you will see that now we have this package here. You see that this is called the vendor, the name, and the version .wgt. This file, okay, even if it has an extension WGT, which is an extension using WireCloud, is just a zip file, okay? So if you download any package from WireCloud, you are able to change the extension to zip and just unzip it. And you will see that what this has inside is exactly the contents of the source folder. So it has the config, the description, the JavaScript, and the documentation. Okay. Okay, so now we have our package. How we can use our new operator? We have to go to the My Resources. We can upload a new package. Here we have this folder and the package we have just generated. We select it and we upload it. Okay, and now our operator, the one that we have just created, is here. We have all the information that we have already provided, our version, the documentation, and the change log taken from the documentation. That should be part of the component. Okay, and now we are able to use our operator. So if we want to the dashboard that we have previously created, I'm going to put this around here, for example. We can go to the querying section. And now if we go to the operators, we have the My operator that we have just created. So we can instantiate this. Okay. We don't need these two components anymore because we have created a new operator in order to do that. And we send the point of interest here. So now if we click here, okay, we should be able to be making the request. Oh, sorry, my fault. We have removed the hard coding, right? So since we have removed the hard coding, we need to configure our server URL as we have done before. So this was here, settings. We can provide the new configuration. Right. Okay, we can provide the new configuration. And now it should be working okay with the new operator we have just developed. Okay, so it's already 11. So we are going to be closing. The last thing I want to show you is the difference between the operator and the widget. Here I have the EChart widget that we have already used before, and you will see that if we access and if we see the information, this is the content of the source folder, just the content of the source folder because I have extracted directly from the package. And if we open the config file, you will see that the main difference is that the type here is widget. Then all this stuff is similar. We have our preference, etc., and that we have this content tag here, which points to an HTML file, like this one. Okay. Then you also have CSS. You also have the library for EChart, etc. But the main difference is this one. A widget has an index.html file with the content of the web component that to be displayed, because it includes a front end. And that's the only difference in code between an operator and a widget. The only difference is that the widget should include a front end. Then in the JavaScript code, you are able to create this exactly in the same way, with another difference, which is since the widget has an interface and some HTML code, they also receive the shadow DOM as a parameter, so you are able to interact with the DOM. This is done in this way because this is a web component. Okay, so this is why this is receiving this from here, so we can somehow isolate the management of the DOM directly within the widget from the original DOM of WireCloud. And well, that's it. That's all from my side. So I'm going to stop share, and I think that now we have some question and answering. So if you have any question, you can ask.